I want to welcome everyone to our first WIT program of the year for Innovate at UCLA, the Power Pivot, turning unmet expectations into a strategic advantage. I'm Teresa Miller. I'm the committee chair for the WIT committee here at Innovate at UCLA. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker, Amber Senteno. Amber is the Vice President and Chief Technology Business Officer at City of Hope and an absolute powerhouse in the healthcare technology sector. As a senior executive with a career spanning health plans, care delivery, and tech-driven transformation, she has mastered the art of bridging visionary strategy with rigorous execution. But for her, the work is personal. She believes that because everyone is a patient, every technology decision she makes shapes the communities that we all live in. Throughout her career, Amber has been a champion for modernizing operating models and delivering measurable outcomes at scale. But more importantly, she is a leader who understands the unique challenges we face in high-pressure, highly regulated tech environments. She's here today to share a practical framework for reclaiming our energy and our influence, and to help us navigate the unmet expectations we all face in tech and turn them into our greatest leadership assets. Please join me in welcoming Amber Senteno.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction and welcome, Teresa. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted and grateful to be here today. So I chose this topic, the power pivot, turning unmet expectations into strategic advantage, because I truly believe that investing in ourselves isn't optional, it's foundational. And in tech, we're trained to optimize systems every day. And so this is about optimizing self, because leadership is the system that carries everything else. And it really matters at every level. So whether you're just starting out, or you're in transition, or you're a seasoned leader, it matters. So regardless of where you are in your career, you are your number one priority, because you are the one person you will take with you into every room, every meeting, every challenge, and every opportunity. I've also learned that technical strength and hard work matter. Of course they do. But that's not enough by themselves to sustain me and to protect my peace or to build a lasting influence. What sustains me is the inner foundation of how I think, how I respond, how I recover, and how I choose. Because these moments quietly shape careers. And that's what today is about. Because unmet expectations happen to all of us. The meeting you thought would go differently. The conversation that didn't land the way that you expected. The moment you realized you were left out of something important. Or the time you did the work and someone else got the credit. This isn't about avoiding those moments. It's about how I've learned to lead myself through them so that I can lead others better. So before I go further, I want to share a little bit more context, not because this is about me, but because it explains how I came to this framework and why I believe this foundation has to be nurtured over time. Next slide, please. As shared earlier, I've spent my career in healthcare technology leadership across several organizations and roles in a lot of complex and high-stake environments. And earlier in my career, I believed that technical mastery was the key. If I knew more, if I delivered more, if I proved myself more, everything else would follow. And what I learned through the experience is this. Mastery is not achieved by being technical alone. Technical expertise can get me into the room, but it doesn't automatically sustain my influence once I'm there. What sustains influence and what sustains me is the foundational leadership work that requires constant nurturing and evolution. I need to be focusing on self-awareness and emotional intelligence, presence, perspective, and the ability to navigate ambiguity and power dynamics, along with the discipline of reflecting instead of reacting. And this isn't work that I finish. This is work that I tend to again and again as I continue to grow and evolve. And all along the way, I've been new. I've been the only one. I've been underestimated. I've been wrong. And once in a while, I'm actually right. But, I'm also and have been deeply supported and sponsored. So let me share a moment that made this real for me. Again, going back to earlier in my career, I was delivering by every technical and operational measure. The work was solid. The outcomes were very strong. But there was a gap between what I expected and what I was experiencing. I wasn't being pulled into these key conversations that I should have been. Decisions were being made without my input. And at one point, something that I had really worked hard on was presented as though it just simply emerged without acknowledgement. My first instinct was to push harder, prove more, work more. But instead of feeling empowered, I felt frustrated and honestly resentful. That's when I had to pause and ask myself a couple of questions. The first one was, why am I really here? And the answer wasn't the title or the recognition. It was purpose, impact, mission, and meaningful work. Second question I asked myself was, what am I missing by staying stuck in this feeling of frustration and not feeling empowered? And the answer for me was gratitude. Not gratitude that the situation had happened, but gratitude for what I was learning and for the resilience that I was building and for the fact that I still had a choice. So nothing changed overnight externally, but internally for me, everything shifted. What has grounded me through all of it is purpose and gratitude, because when expectations aren't met, purpose and gratitude are what keep me anchored when everything else feels uncertain. And even with that grounding, unmet expectations don't disappear. They're still part of leadership. The difference is they meet a different version of me now. Next slide, please. So unmet expectations are inevitable. We all know that. In fact, for me, I found that they tend to show up more when I'm growing, when I'm visible, when I'm taking, or more visible, I should say, when I'm taking risks, when I'm leading change. And quite frankly, if I'm not experiencing unmet expectations, it's usually a sign that I'm not stretching myself enough. So for me, the question isn't, how do I stop this from happening? The question for me is, what do I do next so I don't hand my power away in the moment when I'm experiencing it? Because most of the time for me, when expectations aren't met, my response is automatic. And that automatic response follows a very predictable pattern. Next slide, please. So this is what I call the automatic loop, Trigger, interpretation, emotion, reaction, and then results. So simply stated, something happens, I interpret it quickly, often without full data. That interpretation triggers emotion. That emotion drives reaction. Reaction produces a result, and often not the results I actually want. Maybe it was the email that I would have wished I would have waited on sending. Or maybe it was the meeting where my tone did more damage than the issue itself. So unmet expectations show up in a lot of ways. Maybe being held to a different standard, being excluded again from those key conversations, getting interrupted and the group just moves on, getting vague or unfair feedback, being overlooked for an opportunity. So, can you think of a time when you've experienced any of these? Yeah, me too. And that's why I call it a loop. And here's the part I had to learn the hard way. My time and energy are assets. When I spend them on things that I can't control, what someone else did, meant, or should have done, I don't get results. I get drained. And that's the real cost because it quietly pulls me away from my ambitions and my goals and the leader I'm committed to being. So when this happens, the event itself isn't what costs me power. It's the unexamined reaction that does. And when I'm in the loop, purpose and gratitude are often the first things that I lose. And when I lose those anchors, I start reacting from emotion instead of from choice. So what I needed and what I've tried to build over time was a way to interpret the loop in real time. And that is what I call the power pivot. Next slide, please. So the power pivot is the moment that I remember when expectations aren't met. I don't lose power. I choose how I use it. For me, the pivot has 3 moves: ground, choose, and redirect. So for grounding, I come back to what I can control because this is where my energy is actually useful. Focusing on my presence, my response, and my clarity. And this is where I try to reconnect to purpose and gratitude. Choosing, I decide. What do I want my leadership to look like right now? Not what do I feel like doing? And redirecting, I really try to reframe the moment towards what's possible next with intention, curiosity, and gratitude for what I'm learning, even if I don't love what's happening. This is where I reclaim power, not by controlling the situation, but by controlling my response. And when I do this consistently, when I actually practice it, it changes what happens inside of me, and it changes how I show up for others. Next slide, please. So when I pivot, I gain a few things immediately: less rumination and more action, way more peace, much clearer perspective, stronger presence, better relationships, much more clear asks, and stronger influence. But the biggest shift for me in this is I move from reacting to leading. And again, purpose and gratitude are a big part of that. That purpose gives me direction, and gratitude steadies me so that I can see clearly. Over time, this stopped being something that I only did in tough moments, and it became how I lead day to day. Next slide, please. So here's what it looks like in practice for me. I try to listen first, not to respond, but because listening is a leadership act. When people feel seen and heard, outcomes improve. I try to treat feedback as a gift, not because all feedback is right, but because it's data and I can learn from it without letting it define me. I prioritize self-care and intentionality because how I care for myself determines how I show up for others. And I reflect and stack wins. I celebrate all wins of all sizes, and I acknowledge missteps, learn from them, and move forward. I don't let one moment become my identity. And I truly believe that reflection is one of those quiet superpowers. And I've learned that self-reflection only works when it's anchored in honesty. When I'm honest with myself, reflection becomes such a great tool for growth and alignment, and not a space for self-criticism, but rather a space for learning and clarity. And I try to build 360 relationships because leadership isn't only vertical, it's lateral. And the mindset underneath it all is that these moments are real and your choices are yours. And I remind myself I always have a choice in how I respond and how I show up. So when I zoom out, here's the truth that I keep coming back to, especially in moments where expectations aren't met. Next slide, please. The strategic advantage was never the title, the role, or the room. When I ground, choose, and redirect, I become the strategic advantage. I have what I need: perspective, presence, relationships, and choice. And again, that purpose gives me direction. Gratitude gives me steadiness. And together they help me lead from choice instead of reaction. And that's why this isn't about survival. It's about something more. It's about how I thrive. And thriving is a decision I make every day, especially when conditions aren't perfect. So I really want to be honest about what this looks like in real life. And here's what I want you to know. There are days when I do this really well, and there are days when I don't. And some days I catch the loop early and I ground myself and I pivot quickly. Other days I realize after the fact and I replay the conversation or the meeting. And I feel it in my body and I think, okay, next time I need to do this. And that's important because mastery isn't something I achieve once, it's something I practice. And for me, mastery requires that I show up every single day, not perfectly, but consistently, staying committed, listening, learning, taking feedback, reflecting, adjusting, and trying again and again. So my commitment again to myself isn't perfection. My commitment is mastery. So here's my invitation to you. Over the next week, I want you to notice a moment where expectations aren't met. And when it happens, ground yourself. What's within your control? Choose. What does your best leadership look like right now? Redirect. How do you reframe with purpose and gratitude towards what's next? Just that one moment, handled differently, can change how you lead. Because when expectations aren't met, we don't lose power. We choose how we use it. And the moment that I pivot is the moment that I lead. Teresa, thank you so much for having me today and for the opportunity to share my thoughts. and my experiences and what's helped me along the way.
Well, Amber, I hope that you are able to stay with us for a bit longer and answer some questions. If anybody has any questions, you can either raise your hand or put them in the chat. Come off camera and feel free to talk with the expert here. So anybody have any questions? If not, I can get started with a couple that I prepared, and then maybe it'll make it everyone jump in. So what about, oh, wait, we've got some on here. Um, it says, we have Jim Rinaldi. You have an interesting job title. What does it mean?
Oh, my job. I ask myself that every day. No, I'm just kidding. So I have the pleasure of really focusing on strategy and operations. So it's what I call running the business of technology. So everything from governance to prioritization, resourcing models. It's everything it takes to run the business of technology.
And then also, when do you decide whether it is time to pivot externally or persevere internally? How do you make that decision? And that's from Kareem.
So um,
Because
oh,
you mentioned a number of times that, when those unmet expectations happen, you center yourself, you go back to your
yeah,
power, right? And then you pivot to that in order to know what to do next. But how many time or is there a point in time where you're like, you know what, pivoting internally as it's a choice, right? You were saying you need to stay in charge of your leadership. So is there a point in time where pivoting internally is not going to give you, um,
yeah,
that next step in your leadership or what you aspire to? And how
yeah,
would you identify those cues?
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you're correct. Sometimes the external outcome doesn't change right away, right? And the internal outcome, but I think the way I would kind of describe it is the internal outcome always matters, right? So I try to preserve my energy, my reputation, my clarity, and then I decide what's next. And I reset expectations and I change the approach, or in some cases, the environment, right? So I think that's kind of it would just depend on each and every situation or scenario, but I hope that answers your question.
It does, because then the environment becomes one of the elements that you assess, right? So
Right.
that's definitely very, very valuable. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the question.
And Amber, I think we have people on the call from all different levels of careers. And
Okay.
I know a lot of, you've been speaking a lot as a senior leader, but is there any difference in the approach for someone that's maybe more new to their career or coming up the leadership ladder? Is there anything different that you would say for them?
Yeah, I mean, the advice that I would give somebody earlier in their career is get clear on your controllables, your craft, your communication, your relationships, your asks. But let's not leave out the senior leaders. I would say the advice for them is being one myself is model the pause, and make expectations really explicit and create the space where people don't have to spend energy really decoding power dynamics. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, what happens if you do the pivot and nothing changes, right? So maybe you've thought of a few steps to take. You really feel like this is going to make a difference, but you still don't get the outcome you desired.
Again, I think that that's very similar to the first question, right? I mean, sometimes if it's the external outcome, it doesn't change right away. But you have to stay focused on the fact that the internal outcome always matters because that's what you have control over, right? And so really, really like double clicking on preserving your energy, focusing on your reputation, how you respond, your clarity. And then depending on the situation, decide what's next, and reset the expectations for yourself, change your approach. And, in some cases, you may have to change that environment.
Okay. We have Joel saying, can you say more about cultivating your 360 relationships? What is your time commitment? How do you connect formally and informally? How many people in each group, etc.?
Oh boy, yes. So I will tell you that this is something that I have really challenged myself to do more of. I'd say the last 18 months. Building not only better relationship with my peers, and the leaders that I work with or partner with, but going beyond that, beyond just your immediate peer group. So just whether you're having coffee, whether you're having a drink, whether you're going to lunch, or you just try to find those commons to build the relationships. So important. But then even outside of that, really getting involved in things that I'm incredibly passionate about, where I can find those commons. So I do a lot of work supporting women in technology at all levels. I really enjoy. There's a couple of groups here in Southern California. I recently was able to join Innovate at UCLA, which is fantastic. But there's Sims here in Southern California. And as you meet people in forums like that, building just those more one-on-one connections and trying to get some one-on-one time so they can get to know you and you can get to know them, so they can figure out how to best support you. I also do a lot of work with Girls Inc. here in Southern California, because I absolutely love the energy that comes out of women that are younger, especially in high school, that are interested in STEM, and just getting to know them and seeing things through their eyes, and being able to partner with them in their journey is such an absolute joy. And so those are just a few things that I do to just get to know, people at all different levels, internally, externally. But relationships are so incredibly important. And so if you're not investing the time, make the time. It's something that I've had to really, again, hold myself accountable to do more of, the past couple of years. And I can tell you that the outcome of doing that has been amazing, and not just amazing because I'm networking, if you will. It's amazing because I've really formed true friendships through it, and I've learned so much in doing so. So there's so many benefits. It's not, so don't view it as like, oh, the amount of time and work that this is taking, because that's how I used to view it. But I'm really, really appreciating the outcomes that it has.
Yeah, I agree. I think that looking at forming alliances at work is so important too, right? Like looking at how, you can work with someone for mutual benefit. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, and it does lead to long-term benefit. We have got a question from Rosemary. She's saying, how do you manage the pivot when balancing work and life clashes, like sick child, family needs, etc.?
Well, I shared early on in today's discussion is you are your number one priority. And so you can't show up well for others if you're not well, or if your child's not well. And so that needs to be the priority first and always, simply stated. And
I
I
like
know and I will say, I know it's easier said than done, but it's true. It's very true. And don't worry about being judged. Don't worry about anything. You have to put yourself first always, because it'll impact how you show up for others.
Thank you for answering that.
Yes, of course.
I think it's difficult too, especially as a lot of women who work, they have children, there's 1,000 priorities. So I love that in your message, you talk a lot about finding inner peace and how that makes you probably makes you better at all those jobs, right? So I think that's great. We have a comment saying I'm sorry, I'm really going to mess up your name. I think
You,
it's
you won't, my Sharika. I got you. I
Masharika,
got
did
you.
you
Just
want to
my
add your
Sharika.
comment?
I don't think I need to. I mean, if anyone has any questions, they can. It's pretty straightforward. If
Okay,
you'd like me to add, I can. I have no problem with doing that.
it's up to you.
All right, let's roll. So recently, one of my mentors just taught me to have social days. And I was like, what? Like, who has a social day? And he's like, yeah, you just set aside 30 minutes and say, hey, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I can meet with you, or Mondays and Wednesdays. That way, when people come to try and infringe on our schedule, which we have an abundance of time, right? Everyone has all the time in the world for someone that says, hey, I want to have a coffee chat. It's like, well, maybe just choose a day of the week for 30 minutes and say that's the day that I have available for that meet and greet or extending our business relationships, as you were saying.
Mhm. I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's being intentional, right? And that's and you're investing back into yourself. And again, never apologize for that. Never apologize for that because you're worth it and you deserve it. And it's so healthy. So I love that.
Amazing. All right, we have Anna saying, in the age of AI, how do you find the right balance as a decision maker when implementing technology, automated features, apps, and AI agents within the City of Hope technology infrastructure when human interaction is important for patient care?
Yeah, so I do have a little bit of a play here where I am new to City of Hope or newer to City of Hope. I have an amazing colleague, Naseem, who is our Chief AI Officer. And she's done an amazing job, and along with Simon, who is our leader, to really build a very strong governance, for how things are reviewed. And so um, it's quite impressive. I think a lot of people are struggling on having strong governances, but I think that they've done a really good job of getting that outlined and ensuring that it's done in a responsible way.
Thank
Okay,
you.
and we mentioning Simon, he's got a question for you. So and
Oh,
also
boy.
you may want to manage how you answer this. He says, is there a difference you see in managing up versus managing peers and subordinates?
Thanks, Simon. I really appreciate it. Um, yeah, I do. I do think there's a little bit because I think that the level of detail difference is different depending your audience. You're going to shape your messaging and the level of detail differently depending on who your audience is, right? So I think that the core facts remain the same, but I think how you deliver and the messaging is going to be very different just depending on the audience.
And to further that topic about, managing maybe and coaching your peers, your subordinate, um, or even, through influencing people at a higher level, how do you bring those soft skills, within the team? Because, it's something that you seem to have adapted with time, but are there tools or things that you try to coach people through, whether you have a different direct influence on them because they work for you or influencing up, right? To try to see that behavior being mimicked.
Yeah, I think that how do I even, that's a really good question. Um, I think that what is really important is that you try to come from a place of empathy, especially when it comes to like anybody actually. And you try to put yourself in just a better place of understanding instead of what you're trying to get them, like instead of pushing something towards them, right? And I think it depends on every scenario. Of course, it's going to be unique on how you do that, but I just think that I don't think I'm doing a good job at answering on this, but I know that I don't like it when somebody approaches me and it's more, I know how I want to be coached and I know how I want to be approached. So I try to use that type of technique of like what I want, and to really kind of approach the best approach for that particular individual. And I guess that's kind of a good way of also saying that it's not a peanut butter spread. You have to really try to understand who that person is and what their style is so that you can get the best result for them and for you, right? And so it's there's not a one way to answer that. I think it's really driven by trying to get to know that person and approaching it in a different way.
That sounds great. So empathy first. And do you use also replaying of scenario or situations? Is it something that you tend to do for, because you said you were doing it for yourself, but do you tend to do it as well as part of the discussion?
It depends on the
It
individual.
depends.
Yes,
Okay. It's
yes.
really tailored to the person. Sounds
Because
great. Thank
that could work for me, right?
Yes,
But it may not work for the other person, and that's where you've got to just be really um, self-aware and how you are approaching people.
absolutely.
You
Thank you
can
so
try
much.
you can try that peanut butter spread, but your response or the success rate isn't going to be as good if you really try to tailor it to that individual person.
Certain. Thank you so much.
Okay, we've got Daria here. How do you decide that you're pivoting too often and it might be time to switch jobs? Oh, goodness. Or that you need to pivot better and stay where you are?
Um, so I don't think that you can ever pivot too much. And it's because the whole point of pivoting is that you are detecting that there's opportunity, right? You're detecting that there's something that you need to, there's something within your control of what you need to focus on or change, right? And so I don't know, I can't really say in terms of switching jobs, but I can tell you every day I'm pivoting, every single day. And it just depends on what the scenario is. And that just staying focused on what I have control over um, allows me to be more successful.
Interesting. So, what do you say if people just say the power pivot is just emotional regulation? I mean, to me, it seems like so much more, but like, what do you say to the naysayers out there?
That's a fair question. Well, it includes emotional regulation, I would say, but it's bigger. It's a leadership practice. And it's how I protect, for me, it's how I protect my energy, how I stay aligned to my goals, and how I move from reacting to very intentional action. And that, for me, it improves outcomes.
Amazing. Does anyone else have any questions or comments they want to add to the conversation? All right. Well, I want to thank you, Amber, for sharing this very personal leadership technique with us today. I think it was amazing, and I think we all picked up quite a few pointers. I think everyone's saying thank you. If I could have everybody just hold on for a minute, we'll do a quick recap of some of the upcoming Innovate at UCLA events, but just a quick round of applause virtually for Amber, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right, if we could go back to the slides for Innovate real quick. Upcoming events, if we could move forward. Again, Innovate at UCLA is a membership-based organization. We have not just the Women in Technology events, but many events throughout the year. We have what we call our CXO coming up, CXO Exchange coming up, where we have some of the researchers from UCLA talking to us about the data that leaders need to talk to their leadership teams about AI. And then also in May, we have our it's more than a half-day program. It's like a 3/4 of a day program, which we call our summer solstice, and that will have all kinds of speakers and events coming. And then if we could move to the next slide, here's our board. We have representation from across Southern California, many, many different industries. If you go to the next slide, you can see some of the companies that these individuals represent. One of the reasons that I love Innovate at UCLA is that I not only get to do that networking and 360 relationship building among my own industry, but across all sorts of industries, everything from academia to government to healthcare, like Amber, to media and entertainment. So it's all represented in our organization with a lot of great people. So if you are interested, I definitely encourage you to check out the organization in more detail. And if everyone would be willing to do a survey, we would really appreciate it. There's a link in the chat. There's also the QR code on your screen. And I think we probably also will do a follow-up request. Feedback that you give us helps us program the next event to meet your expectations. So we would really appreciate it if you would do the survey. And that is it. Thank you, everyone, for attending.